Hello. Hello, everyone. I'm Gemma Starr, and welcome to another episode of Heart Warriors. Heart Warriors is a series I've been inspired and guided to do thanks to my energetic connection to Kata Judah. Kata Judah is the sacred masculine site in Central Australia, very close to Uluru, which is the sacred feminine site. And what I'm here to do is to give a platform to our men so they can be guests on the show and talk man to man about their journey into the heart. What does that look like? What have been their experiences along the way? What tools, practices, insight, wisdom can they now share with other men walking that path? And of course, us women who are walking right there beside them. Today's guest is an author and spiritual teacher, and his name is Nicolas Canon. So I'm really looking forward to hearing from Nicolas and finding out about his journey into the heart. Enjoy. Hello, Nicolas Canon. Welcome to Heart Warriors.
Thank you.
I'm really excited for this one because apart from being an author, you're a spiritual teacher. So later on, I'm really excited to get into, the heart and the spiritual teachings of the heart. But let's start with the man you are today. How would you describe yourself?
How would I describe myself? Oh, it's a challenging question. I'll say the way that I like to see the world and myself as part of that is as someone who is aiming to live a life of spirituality, a life that is informed by something greater, something essential, while simultaneously being extremely stoic and practical. I feel that in my own journey, a lot of teachers or guides tend to fall a little too much on either side for my own preference. There's a lot of teachers that are, preaching a lot of spiritual stuff, maybe teaching a lot about this dimension, karma, past lives, all kinds of things, frequencies, vibrations. Nothing wrong with that, but I feel that a lot of times they're quite ungrounded and disconnected from life as we know it. And in their obsession with, ascension and 5D and a lot of things that I think most of the time they don't even know what they mean, they lose touch with their immediate reality, with having healthy relationships, with having healthy finances, with having health. And on the other side, there's a lot of people who are very much consumed by the 5 sense experience of life. And then it's all about the hustle, the grinding, if you have a relationship problem, then you need to do A, B, C, and you need to communicate in a very exact and rigid manner, and only then you can solve your things. And so I don't like to describe myself, but if I'm asked, I would like to believe that I'm someone who is grounded and connected to his heart. I think the heart is I like this podcast, Heart Warriors, because the heart is something that is quite tangible and that also represents something far greater. It's not God, it's not divine, it's not something that gives room for a lot of imagination, but it's something that is inside. So yeah.
Oh, that's beautiful. Can we expand on this awareness you've brought straight into this conversation around the heart? And you did touch on now what the heart is, but let's get right into it. And can we expand on that subject? And how would you describe the heart in a practical, grounded way, and then also in a spiritual way?
So I would say in a very practical way, our heart sustains life. Our heart is the organ that is, from the moment we're born, well, before we're born, actually, it is pulsating life through our system. It's in a constant series of expansion and contraction, of nourishment and cleansing. So, the valves that it works with is constantly interaction with the rest of the body. So in a very practical way, is that part within us that is serving everything else, that is working to support and maintain everything else. And if you look at it, the heart is not only I forgot the right word for that, but I know it in Spanish. It's not only pushing nutrients and blood outside, because it also has to generate a contraction to move the blood that has picked up a lot of stuff, to recycle it, right? So in that way, the service that the heart does is, it's with one hand it's giving, with the other hand it's taking. There's balance. Because a lot of people, they say, oh, I'm just too loving, I'm just too connected to my heart, too compassionate, and they create stories to become doormats. Quite often they create stories to compromise their own integrity, to bend over backwards, to be people pleasers, and then blame it on the heart. It's like, no, your heart is not just giving and pushing blood into your system. No, there's a process where it comes out and it returns. So in a practical way, our heart is a center of service, a center of life. In a spiritual way, you can take that and see it as, like, when different traditions, the heart is connected to the spirits of the fire. And they say, there's only one fire, there's only one flame that has extended across galaxies, across solar systems, across our planet. The fire that they light up in China, in South America, and here is all fueled by the same sun. This heart is fueled by the same sun. Like the nutrients, the things that I have to eat to maintain this, is all fed by the same light, the same fire. So in that sense, in a spiritual sense, the heart is that place of union, is that spark, that flame from which everything is created, from where everything bursts out, and is very unique in the way in which it finds expression through you, through me, through somebody else, is very different. But in the same way, the fire that they make in South America is very different, perhaps, from the candles that I have here next to me right now. Very different from a fire that somebody else is using with gas to cook something, from the fire that somebody is starting in their ex-partner's house because they're angry. It's the same energy, but it finds a lot of different expressions.
Oh, so good. Nicholas, can we jump back into your childhood? And what was a particular challenge for you that, in retrospect now, you can see was something you had to overcome for your personal journey?
In my childhood, many things. I think that, like most people that I know, family life has its beautiful things. There's a lot of support that comes from our parents, and a decent dose of trauma. Everyone, to a different degree, but everyone was served a decent dose of nonsense from the lack of understanding from their parents. Nothing wrong with that. It's just the reality. In my case, it was two things that were connected. I would say one of the bigger ones was I'm Colombian, and I was born and raised in Colombia. And in Colombia, especially back then, not as much today, parents had a very backwards way of raising kids. They were raised through a lot of violence and fear instead of respect and love. So that's what they knew. So with my mom, that was the case in many ways. She had her own emotions, her own grief to process, and I was not a crazy kid, but I was hyperactive, and I gave her a lot of chances and opportunities and excuses to take that anger out. So I grew up with a lot of violence, a lot of physical violence. And that was combined with me being extremely shy and reserved. So I felt like these two things collided into feeling that there was a very intense emotional and internal experience happening within me, but the lack of trust, lack of words, the lack of friends sometimes that I could share that with or that I could process that with. So I'll get to that in a little bit. Together with the father figure being absent because he's working to provide, to take care. We grew up quite poor, and I mean he was very responsible in that regard. And I feel that, well, a lot of the work that I do today is oriented towards bringing back into balance the relationship that was skewed with our parents. In my case, the love of the feminine was stained with violence, with drama, with intensity. It was unpredictable. It was consuming and entrapping. Like, I didn't feel free. I felt very controlled. It was riddled with fear. He was walking on eggshells. And then the masculine was provision, protection, but not a lot of presence. So these patterns played out in 100 different ways when I grew up. In my own relationships to life, my relationships to women, of course, my relationships to work. So I believe that those were probably that was probably a very, I don't want to call it wound because it's part of the curriculum. So it was probably a a challenging part of the of this curriculum that it impacted me for many years because I grew up to be, from being the shy guy to being like the frat boy and drinking, partying, and being borderline narcissistic when it came to women, very misogynistic at times, zero compassion, zero empathy. Out of being afraid of women, quite frankly. It's like if I'm the tougher one, if I am like rougher than her, if I have less emotions than her, then for sure she's not gonna hurt me like my mom did. Right? Very unconscious. It was not a conscious thought process. It was just the way in which things played out. And that took a big chunk of my 20s to learn the lesson, to go through enough heartbreaks to realize, wait a second, maybe things are not the way that they seem.
Beautiful awareness. Thank you for sharing that. Nicolas, can we go back to that little boy living in fear? How did he cope with the situation? What did he do to either rationalize it or survive it or just get through the day-to-day experience?
Isolation was a thing that I did a lot at the time. Just withdrawing to my room, painting, listening to music. When I was a teenager, joining a punk rock groups and getting a mohawk and I don't know if you have this. I think you have this in North America, but um, going to those concerts where you're just punching and kicking everybody who's around you to kind of release the anger and get some steam off your shoulders. Um, but for me, it was mostly isolating, dealing with things on my own. When I had, but when I was a little bit older, then video games, then eventually drinking, partying. But originally, I would just isolate and distract myself.
Yeah, I can relate to this much on my own journey as well. So did you have brothers and sisters around you to share the experience with?
Two sisters. I have an older sister and a younger sister. Mm, I think at that age, is well, also without the tools, it's kind of impossible to share that experience, especially if I'm getting beaten up because I was teasing one of them a lot. Then I feel like they're complicit in my pain. Um, there was maybe an implied sense of like this is wrong or this is not okay. Um, at the same time, we will look at our cousins and friends from school, and the way in which we were getting hit was like a cuddle compared to what some of them were going through. Like their parents had these like sticks that were hung on the wall, and they were like the punishment sticks. And some of them had like, the one for the horses if you behave very bad, and then another is like based on the level of how naughty you were, then you get a different kind of stick. So it's quite brutal and almost animalistic. But when you grow up and that's what's around you, you think, oh, I'm just getting hit with the belt and with the slipper. So my parents are great. Right? Is because you don't know, you can't imagine that what somebody can be raised without violence is that's possible. So there was not much of a conversation around that. Of course, after growing up, after moving to Canada, after starting to unpack all the trauma, then conversations came up around what that meant for all of us and the things that unfolded from that. In the moment, no. In the moment, I didn't think there was an issue with that. I thought, well, this is what I get for being an ass to my sisters sometimes. And this is just the way that things are handled.
Yeah, amazing. So let's jump back into your adulthood now. And you were saying that in your 20s, you worked through it and was also, partying and, doing punk rock and drinking and whatever. What would you say was your rock bottom moment of your adulthood? And then we can see how you started spiraling up from there.
So rock bottom, it was a period. I don't know if it was a moment, but it was a period of a couple of weeks. I was 27, 26, 27 at the time. And the relationship that the longest one I had had up until then, which was a little over 3 years, broke down in a disastrous way, or that's the way that I experienced it. It became very, very toxic. We became very toxic with each other. Like she showed up in a way that for me was overwhelmingly ugly, and I also saw a lot of my own ugliness like coming forth, and it was a shock because most of that was not present during the time that we were together, bits and pieces, but it turned really, really ugly. And mm, the problem was that I was working as a dating and relationship coach at the time, and I thought I understood women and I understood relationships and I understood what it takes to have a good relationship. So when that relationship broke apart, when there was so much apathy from one to another, so much violence in the communication, um, I just realized that I didn't know what I was doing because I couldn't understand how my relationship had turned so ugly. And someone that 1 second was very loving, the next one she was furious, and I think like I felt hated by her, and thinking that maybe and the challenging thing was realizing that maybe I deserved it, that maybe I had done things to cause that. So it's not that I felt I've been a great boyfriend and she's wrong and she's a little crazy. No, it was like, well, she did a lot of things that were hurtful, and thinking, well, actually, if we look back, some of that is deserved. So that was maybe the what caused the greatest pain. Not what she did, but feeling that maybe I got it coming, and maybe it's good that life handed me that situation. The problem is that at the time I used to live with a girl that she was my roommate, and she was very drug friendly, especially on the weekends. So I had easy access to cocaine, to a lot of substances, and it just started with feeling a little bit lonely and sad after the breakup, and joining her in one party, and then next thing you know, we're hanging out quite often, and I take responsibility. Like nothing was ever forced on me, but I wanted to hide, to cope, to numb my feelings in drugs, in Tinder dates, in meaningless sex. And I did that for a couple of weeks, and then until I had like one or two overdoses. I didn't end up in the hospital, but I ended up just passed out. One time I woke up in the middle of a park in Toronto with having like damaged some of my friendships because I was breaking my commitments. I was just drunk most of the time, and I think it was that one, like when I was waking up feeling shame and guilt and a little bit bruised, and some of the jewelry that I had was missing, and not knowing what happened the last couple of hours. And it was only like 4 or 5 if the in the afternoon. I started thinking like, what am I doing with my life? This is not who I know myself to be. Like this is quite disgusting, degrading. And I felt that the pain was consuming me. And in that moment, I realized that maybe that was the rock bottom. I told myself, if I stay in Toronto, I'm gonna end up dead or in jail because I was taking too many drugs and being too stupid. Um, and I thought, you know what? I need to go back to Colombia, kind of go through the emotions, heal, figure out a way to deal with the pain that I'm feeling. Um, just cried out with my grandma, with my sister, with my family. Fortunately, I'm close, and I was close to my family. So more than the grief around the ending of that relationship, it was the grief around who I was, because I realized that who I was up until that moment had created that reality, and was also very clueless. I thought, how many men have I taught, have I shared with and spoken to around having relationships? And my relationship ended up like this. So I was second guessing the work that I did those years, thinking maybe I caused more harm than good. Maybe, it was the blind leading the blind. So I couldn't keep working on that. I had to just, everything that I was had to be reassessed and examined, because it clearly was not effective or useful. So that was, yeah, I think that is waking up and feeling that my body is in pain, that I'm destroying myself with substances, that I have blacked out, that my friends are upset at me because I've broken certain commitments, that I'm being irresponsible with work. All of that compounded to tell me like, hey, I need to pay attention to this pain in a different way.
And that brings me into my next question. Now, with you as a spiritual teacher, can you please share with us the gift of the pain, of your pain, and then maybe, we can expand it into pain in general?
The gift of my pain. Actually, I just finished writing my first book, which is exactly around that. The journey is the gift of pain. Um, for me, I think that the greatest gift that pain brought me was the gift of presence and attention, an attention that cannot be escaped, because life had been whispering in my ears through the years. Hey, maybe that's not okay. Hey, there are different choices. Hey, to not do that. And I ignored it. But pain is something that you cannot ignore. You cut your finger and it burns and it hurts. And the deeper the pain, the more you're forced to be present, to pay attention. And for me, this pain made it impossible not to pay attention to it. And I tried to numb it in 1,000 ways. So the gift was that it forced me to reassess and re-examine everything I thought I was. The identity that I had carefully curated over the years, which I thought was great. The party guy, the dating coach, the this and that, the social guy, and then realizing that how much of that was a lie. It was also the pain that allowed me to really take inventory and become responsible over what I had done, the role I had played in my own misery, which I didn't want to admit. I thought she's wrong, she did this, she did that, she lied, she betrayed me, she. And with enough pain, I just realized, boy, sure, that's the easy way out, but was it all her? And realized, no, like I had a big role in what happened. I was very responsible for co-creating that relationship and also the way in which it ended. And that was the gift of pain, that it humbled me, it broke me open, it made me ask for help, and maybe to a degree obligated me to receive it, just because I couldn't do it alone. Because clearly alone was still working out. If my advice worked out, I wouldn't have ended up in such a mess. So, in a condensed way, the gift of pain to me was forced me to pay attention, to not ignore anymore the signs of my heart. It forced me to be humble enough to admit where I was wrong and to take responsibility for the ways in which I had contributed to creating my own misery. And it also forced me, in a way, or made it so that I had no choice but to ask for help and receive it, and understand that I don't know everything. And if I knew, my life would be different, clearly. But because I don't, there's a lot that I have yet to learn. And in that space of I don't know and I need help, a lot of help is provided by life.
Do you think pain keeps pushing us onto the path of authenticity? Do you think it's when we're feeling pain, whether it's mental, emotional, and ultimately physical, is that a push against inauthenticity? And when we come into alignment with love, with authenticity, who we truly are, the pain eases?
So the suffering eases. Pain can still happen. Like pain, as long as we're alive, we are exposed to it. It will come. Suffering is optional. I do believe that the suffering is a clear sign of us living life in a way that is betraying our deepest truth. It's out of harmony. And when we are in harmony, yeah, there's no suffering whatsoever. There can be pain without suffering. Um, Pain is, the way that I understand it is like, when you play music, there are notes that are harmonious and other notes that are not. So maybe I'll show you quickly. So, you can play a chord and it sounds nice, but let's say then there's a note that maybe doesn't quite fit, and then you get noise. When there's harmony, it's very beautiful. So I think pain is a note that is placed in a way that creates dissonance. It's not wrong, and my guitar teacher told me once that if you play, there's no such thing as a wrong note if you know what to follow it with, right? So you can play a note that sounds a little dissonant, but if the next one is harmonic to that one, if it matches, then what you got is like jazz, like a bit of musical poetry that you feel, oh, this is getting ugly, but it's actually rescue in a beautiful way. And I think that's a great metaphor for life. I will not change what I went through with my ex-girlfriend. I do not want to repeat it, and I hope people don't have to go through similar things. Yet it was such a gift, but it was because the notes that followed were harmonizing. There was a story, an integration of that story that was edifying. Maybe for her, maybe for other people, the notes that they played afterwards, it was just more noise and more noise, more noise, and suddenly it's a lot of chaos and overwhelm. So in that sense, I think we're free to play the most harmonic melody or to play the most disastrous of, we can just beat the instrument and create a lot of noise. Ultimately, we have to listen to what we're playing. So I think that's just life. We can say, oh, my truth is I want to play whatever note I want to play, and I want to go through all the pain that I feel like going through, and that's an option. But I think in our deepest truth, we all enjoy more a song that is harmonious and beautiful than noise. We feel the contraction in our heart. So yes, suffering shows up when we're consistently playing notes that we're not enjoying, and when we're playing a melody that we're enjoying and that is a good expression of what's in our heart, then there's no noise there. It's just enjoyable. Even if sometimes we err, even if sometimes we take the wrong step, we quickly adjust.
Oh, this is so good. And I just love this analogy of music that you brought into it. And obviously, you're a musician. And what's coming through for me, and I haven't thought of it maybe precisely in this way, but what do you think about that the human body is the instrument and the divine is trying to play the music through us, and our emotions are our control of the notes, because every emotion has an immeasurable energetic frequency. So when we are in that place of harmony and love and, gratitude, freedom, we can play the pure divine music, which ultimately creates the music on earth. But if we're feeling anger and guilt and sorrow, it's like playing those off notes and we feel a bit of a jar and a bit of we're uncomfortable. How does that metaphor sit with you?
I think it's accurate. We're not only instruments but amplifiers. You take an angry person. It's not they're not just singing the song of anger. If they can spread it through crowds. If the crowd is receptive to that, it can be easily passed on. And same with joy, same with love, right? They're very contagious, but we can amplify that. All it takes is a grumpy person to create a lot of chaos in one room if people are susceptible to that. And the same way, all it takes is one very joyful, centered, loving person to bring a lighthearted vibe to a place that maybe before was a bit dense.
Yeah, I mean, the quantum universe is all frequency and vibration. And once we can, tap into that and see everything as a music, attunement, harmonies. I mean, it's even in the words, isn't it, that we use? It's just a beautiful divine song. Have you got anything else to say around the harmonies of the universe before we move on?
Just a reminder that there's nothing wrong with playing a note that comes out as noise. It's not wrong or right, it's just different note. It was just out of harmony. That's it. There's no need to feel guilty, to feel ashamed. Same way in life, there's nothing wrong with making mistakes, with taking paths that are full of pain or chaos. There's nothing wrong with that. It's one of the choices that we have. In an instrument, I have the choice of all the different notes, and I can make out of that whatever I wish. But I think that in the spiritual journey, a lot of people buy the idea of the original sin or whatever version of guilt they have been taught about. Oh, I've been doing wrong, I've been living life the wrong way. No, there's no wrong way. It's just you make choices, and sometimes those choices create a beautiful melody, and sometimes they create a lot of noise. But how to know if you don't play, if you don't practice? How to get it right if you don't try? um, the original definition of sin, it's not something that is done wrong, but it means missing the mark. So to sin is not to do something wrong, but it's to miss the mark. In music, is that like, let's say you have certain pace and you put your notes in between those, that's a sin. It's not that it's wrong, it's like you just missed the mark. So you adjust, you realize, oh, that sounded, that created a little bit of noise, I need to pay more attention. That's it. I think relating like that to life, to the mistakes that we make, it's a healthier way than thinking, oh my God, God's gonna punish me, I have fallen off the path, I am guilty, I am this and that, which is quite common. Religious and non-religious people, we all have our version of this. uh, we like beat ourselves up a little too much over our shortcomings. And I think it's useful to remember that there's nothing wrong with that. Just, it's just the melody that we're playing. And if we don't like it, it's time to change it, but without the burden of, oh, I can't believe I was playing that way. And no. Just, okay, you missed the mark. Take a deep breath and continue, move on.
Oh, so good. Nicholas, did you grow up in a religious household?
Yes, yeah, my parents were, well, the religion that was kind of enforced at home was Catholicism.
Okay. Can we speak of this? Because I know a lot of people can relate to this story, and you are now a spiritual teacher. So, how did that story happen from what you remember being indoctrinated with as a child through religion to now teaching spirituality?
So again, in Colombia, it was imposed. Government and the Catholic Church were best friends. So almost in every household, you had to be baptized, do your first communion, the confirmation, the whole thing. My mom's family especially was quite religious, so we had to go to church every Sunday and do the whole thing. For me, the problem was hearing the priest tell people how to live a good family life, giving them, parenting and marriage advice. Then asking my dad about it, like, oh, I thought they cannot have a family. And he said, yeah, they can't. I'm thinking that it was like they were hypocrites. How can you tell people about what it's like to be a father, what it's like to be a husband, if you're probably a virgin, you never have kids? Like, how, with what authority you speak of these things? So I realized, and also just noticing sometimes family members or people that we went to church with at church, or even my mom at church, oh, peace, peace, I love you, hug here, in front of the priest. And then the moment we get home, she's taking out the belt because she was upset about something. And I'm thinking, well, where did all the peace and love go? It's nonsense. It's fake. So for me, that was the breaking part of religion. I'm not saying all that it's all religions or all religious people. I think that a lot of people find value, and more than value, maybe solace and some sense of peace and comfort in what they believe in. But it is not spirituality, not for most people. When I say spirituality is not an idea. It's not a thought of I believe in God, I believe in energies, I believe in spirits. This is religiosity as well. Anything that a person believes that they don't have a direct experience of is blind faith. It can be accurate, but if it's not in their field of experience, it's blind faith. It's religiosity. It's like is it the Mormons? Like the Jehovah Witnesses that think that the Armageddon is coming and Jesus is gonna come and the sky is gonna turn into fire and only people from their own little club are gonna be saved and go on stairs to heaven, to the eternal life. I'm not saying it's not gonna happen, but they don't know for sure that it will happen. There's no direct experience. There's just an idea, no different from the one that someone who preaches or talks about spirituality, energies, whatever God, goddess they worship or they speak of. I know in today's circles, for women, there's a lot of things with Isis, with Magdalene, with so many things. There's all kinds of things, which largely, at least within the circles that I know and I've traveled a lot, it's the same. It's another expression of religiosity because it's people believing what they want to believe, not what they know, not what they have seen or experienced directly, but what it's a story that resonates with them and they would like to believe it. Spirituality for me is direct experience. It is knowing, not thinking, not believing, not buying somebody else's idea, not reading a book and thinking, oh, this makes sense. That's not spirituality. That may be spiritual entertainment. Spirituality for me is touching those dimensions beyond what we call, life, like the five sense experience, directly having access to these things, and from that place realizing that there's more to life, not believing that there's more to life. That's the big difference. So back to your question, for me, religion was believing that there was a God. Spirituality is knowing, is encountering that energy, quote unquote, face to face, is having a direct communion with it, not from the mind, not from blind faith, but from experience. So in that sense, we're all in some form of spiritual journey. We all want to touch that sense of unlimited expansion. Just some people try to get at it through food. They try to expand themselves in a limitless way. Some people do it through money. They want to be richer and richer and wealthier and more powerful. A lot of people do it through sex. They want to feel one with the universe, one woman at a time, several times a week, quite often. Some women do the same with men. But you cannot count your way to infinity. There has to be a different method. So, but ultimately, we're all in a spiritual journey, whether we're aware of it or not. We're all seeking that sense of expansion, of being bigger, greater than we were yesterday. Just that for some people, that quest finds very superficial expression, and for some it finds a bit of depth, and in that depth then things can happen that can start to quench the thirst.
That's fascinating what you said around food. So are you saying people that overeat are trying to fill themselves and compensate for not being full of God or divinity or love? How would you phrase that?
So these are broad statements, not to be taken like verbatim, but overeating can have a lot of different reasons. One of the most common ones that I've seen in the people that I have worked with is a person will overeat when in their childhoods they did not feel seen. So they need to take up more space to feel seen, to get the attention of their parents. Maybe they were abandoned, maybe their parents were working too much, maybe something happened. Maybe they didn't have boundaries, they were not respected. So as a way of like feeling more seen or taking up space, like the need is to take up space, is expressed physically. There's another counter side to that, which is, and this is common especially on women and men that experience sexual abuse when they're young, and is that they correlate being attractive, feeling and looking a certain way, to being vulnerable and being the aim of predators, of sexual predators. So then for them, overeating, it's creating a layer within which they can hide. So they eat a lot so that they can hide, and also so that they can portray themselves as no longer attractive kids or attractive people to remain safe. Overeating for a lot of people also is a way of coping. Like food is the first drug we have, quote unquote drug, we have access to when we're babies. The moment that that you get milk, it soothes your system. So it's the first thing that you have access to if you want to soothe yourself, right? This is you're a child. You can't go and buy drugs when you're like 3 years old, but you can always get more food or go into the fridge and do these kind of things if you're feeling an emotion that you don't know how to handle. So in that sense, like, are they eating because they're not full of God? Well, what does it mean to be full of God? To me, it means, to be in alignment, to be in connection with everything that is happening within themselves and everything that is happening outside of themselves, outside of them. So in that sense, yes, if I'm in connection with my body, I will not eat more than what my body needs. Period. Everything else is necessary. Is eating that is coming from the mind, from a dissociation. So yeah, people who overeat, like, I have yet to meet a person who overeats, who, I think it's possible, but it's rare, who is completely at peace and at ease within themselves, and who's found a degree of emotional stability and even joy within them. Most of the time people go towards excess to cope, to navigate a life that maybe is too stressful, to navigate a mind that is too chaotic, to navigate an emotional system that is all over the place, or sometimes, just as a habit that was installed from childhood for safety.
Oh, they're fascinating insights, and just something for people to feel into, if something resonates there, because, you did say several different scenarios, and to me, they all make sense. Nicolas, you mentioned a lot, talking about your story, about you had to accept responsibility for the part you played in the breakdown of your relationship. Can you please speak to men who are struggling to find where they might have participated or contributed to the breakdown of whatever struggle they're going through in life, and they're feeling very in the victim phase. Can you speak to those men, please, and help them to understand what part they've played in their suffering?
Mm-hmm. I would say, to the men that may be watching this, first, you may be like entitled and perhaps even reasonable around the things that hurt you and the things that you feel that your partner did, the ways in which she wronged you, the ways in which maybe she betrayed you, the ways in which she was the one that destroyed the relationship. I think the first thing is to acknowledge the pain that is felt. It doesn't mean that that is the ultimate truth, but it's their truth in that moment. It cannot be bypassed. You cannot just jump straight into, okay, I'm responsible for all of it. But what about my grief? What about my resentment? What about my anger? What about feeling righteous about like her breaking my boundaries? So I will say the first thing is these men need to own what they're feeling, recognize how much darkness there may be there, like hatred, desire for revenge. It's not rare. And ultimately, to take responsibility is not like it's not one of those monopoly cards that give you bail out of jail. It's not, okay, I take responsibility, so that means that my ex-partner was an angel and it was all my fault. Like, responsibility does not equal fault. It was not your fault that the relationship ended, but you are responsible, which means you are the one that is able to respond. And in this way, I found that, sure, like if I look with a microscope my past relationship, I will see many things that I did poorly, and I can also find a lot of things that she did that were a good match to that, to deserve what I did, and vice versa. I could see a lot of the things that she did towards the end that by nobody's standards will be acceptable, and I could find a lot of people happy to cheer me up and join the band of righteousness of, fuck that, she was wrong, she did this and that. And I did at some point. I shared the story, and then I got some reassurance from my buddies. Yeah, she is this, she's that, and then all the labels. And all right, for a few moments I feel like that my pain is justified. And then what? All right, yeah, my friends agree with me that she was X, Y, and Z. Terrible human being. Okay. What does that say about me? I chose to date that terrible human being for all these years. And I'm the one suffering because that terrible human being is no longer in my life. So, sure, like, complain, be a victim, blame her all that you want, but eventually realize that it doesn't get you anywhere. It's a little pacifier. It suits you for a little bit. It allows your friends and the people you speak with to tell you, oh yeah, that's pretty bad. She was a bad girl. You don't deserve it. You deserve so much better. Pat on the back. It's okay. Life goes on, and you're like, okay, yes. And then what? It's nothing's changed from that. On the other hand, it doesn't mean that it is true, but it is the most empowering of perspectives to assume. What if everything that happened was of my creation? What if I have enough power to have created exactly the life as it manifested itself? Wow. The implications of that are huge, because it means that if it turned out so ugly, then then there's something that really needs attention. Because if I created that, then there's a part of me that is very unconscious to have created such nasty outcome. But if I go down the rabbit hole and I get to the core of that, the implications are also huge. Wow, if this was of my own creation, and now I see clearly, next time I'm gonna create something so much better. It's like if you think it's like I'm listening to music that is nasty and is ugly and it's just noise, and I'm thinking, oh my god, the people that are curating this playlist, they're so terrible, and the owner of this venue is just awful at picking the music. And I could gather a bunch of friends, and everybody's gonna say, yeah, this music sucks. It's terrible to be here. All right, and nothing's changing. But if I consider that maybe I'm the one playing the music, oh, many questions come. Why have I been playing this? This is terrible. Wow, I need to look at myself. But more than that, it's great because if I'm the one that has been playing this, I can stop at any moment and I can play something else. So taking responsibility is the fastest way towards freedom, towards power. Not because she was a good girl and she was an angel. No, I'm sure that in every breakup, both people played an equal role in that ending, including the women who are beaten up by their husbands, including the men that are cheated by their wives. And this is a hard one to accept. Nobody is anybody's victim. You're in a dance, bully and victim. It is perfect no matter what happens. And the uglier that it gets, the more you have to figure out the role that you played in that to prevent that from happening. Too often, I had a friend that she happened since she was very, very young to always date men who beat her up quite badly. Drug dealers, all kinds of, I don't want to say terrible men, but unconscious men. Um, and you could tell, well, one time, all right, that's bad luck. Two times, three times, four times, and then she will be single and she will find a way to like be working out and drop the weights on her head. Like she always had concussions either through accidents or men. So at one point you realize something's happening here that is not about the men. It's about choices she's making, the ways in which her energy is finding expression, ways in which she feels she needs to punish herself. She does it through men, and when she's single, through quote unquote accidents. And that's a rough thing to, well, in her case, it was rough for her to embrace and come to terms with that. And for men who are playing the victim, all right, you can play the victim as long as you want. And I guarantee you, I promise you, your next relationship, you're going to find yourself in the exact same place. Sure, now you will have wasted a few years thinking that, oh, thank God I got rid of this girl because she was terrible and I'm a great guy. Then you find yourself in the next relationship in a similar situation and thinking, oh, it's all women that are wrong. Well, no. It's the sooner you assume the stance of I am responsible for everything that is happening in my life, the more empowered you are to change it, to create something different. And again, this doesn't excuse or justify whatever the other person did. This is not for them. I take responsibility not to free my ex-girlfriend from anything. No, I'm sure she has her own things to deal with. I took responsibility to free myself, to free my future, to learn from my mistakes, to see myself as competent enough and powerful enough to be the one in charge of my relationships. If I'm a victim, what does that mean? That means she was the one leading. She was the one like bossing me around. And how empowering is that? I'm someone's puppy who got thrown out with the garbage. It's a terrible way to see yourself. If you're a man, wouldn't you want to think that, hey, all right, this was awful, and I probably created it. I'm so powerful that I created it, and perhaps we're so unconscious that I didn't realize how I did it. So now that it's hurting, let me take a look at figure out what else I can create and how I can set myself in order so that I enjoy more the relationships that I create. I think that alone, it sets a clear path. On the other one, you're just, crying over spilled milk, gathering some people to complain, to judge, to demonize, and gossip around somebody, to belittle the person that you said you loved because it ended. Nothing good comes out of that. Easy.
Yeah, this is so good because it's a key point and it's something I think we all go through. So I loved how you said, okay, so you have to take responsibility and come into awareness that ultimately we have created that painful situation and now we're going to make a better choice. So what's the bridge in between? Do we wake up one morning, oh, I'm going to make a better choice and go out again in the dating world? Or just something, how do we change the actual inside of us to then create the better opportunity for finding someone more compatible or more loving on the outside?
It's a very good question. It depends on what happened and why it happened. An essential part is being responsible, like deciding this is my responsibility and I will do something about it. I think that's the first step. Well, the first step is being willing to feel all of it, not to hide, not to distract, not to numb through addictions or anything. That's the first step. The second step is to, okay, take responsibility for it. But then the next step is actually the healing work, the understanding. All right, I'm responsible for everything that happened. So how do I change it? It depends, like for some people, the patterns that are playing out may be quite deep. Recently, I was working with a man that was raped by his grandfather when he was a kid, and he's next to other children, and his grandfather with his friends. So it was an ugly and dark state, and of course he spent his life going through all kinds of healing methods and modalities to come to a place where he's fine, functional, and happy to be alive. You know, I am certain in his relationships, these things have come up and shown up. Maybe unworthiness, anxiety around vulnerability, around sexuality, different things. So let's say in these cases, it's not only okay, I'm gonna change, and then that's sometimes you need, if it's something very heavy and that goes way back down, way back, and it's rooted deep down. Sometimes the logical step or the best step is to understand, I don't know, I have never walked the jungles of my heart, and if I try going there, I may get lost. So let me ask somebody that perhaps can understand me, perhaps has walked his or her own jungles and can show me the way. I think that's a sensible thing to do, especially when some trauma or some patterns go really deep and they can be very scary to tackle on our own. And for this, there's people whose life work is to guide other humans through all kinds of different chaos. On the other hand, I would say maybe a bigger chunk of people is not so deep, is not so dark, is not so rooted. Then in those cases, there needs to be an understanding of where is this coming from. It's not, oh, I was very angry at my ex-boyfriend and irritable, and next time I'll be less angry. No. Why were you angry? When did it start? Have you always been angry? What, before you had a boyfriend or a girlfriend? how did your father raise you? How did your mother raise you, right? Like, we have to become detectives of our history and then figure out, wow, actually my dad was violent and he was angry all the time. And I'm realizing that I don't want to be like my mom who was weak. So in a way, I've become like my dad, like overpowering out of fear of being the weak one. So then you realize, oh, there's a lot of stuff that you need to clear out with your dad, with your mom. Not necessarily one like face to face, but at least through the reflection process. Or maybe for some people, it's not a cognitive process. Some people, it's very somatic. The pain, the things stored in their body. There are ways, there are processes, practices of moving that, breaking those patterns, moving them out of their system. The tools that are used, every person has a different pull towards something that fits them. It can be as subtle as yoga. Like yoga, it starts breaking the patterns of how flexible you are, how strong your joints are, how you can move. And that alone starts breaking the patterns of how you think. And it's a very gradual and paced process that it can compound to becoming very robust. On the other end of the scale, you could have experiences like ayahuasca, which is, it's like you've tried yoga, you have tried therapy, you have tried a few things, or you just don't want to waste, well, not waste, you just don't want to spend 5 or 10 years trying to dig out what it is that happened and why it is that you are in a certain way. And then you go to South America, you sit with a shaman, and in a couple of nights, for most people, like very overwhelming and very intense nights, you get to the core of it. You let go and let out of, literally your inner demons, and now you got it. You can come back and live from a different place. So meditation, movement, exercise, sometimes just talking with a friend that understands you can do wonders. So what do we do after we have decided to take responsibility? Well, it depends. If my house is breaking apart and I think, oh, it's my neighbor's fault, okay, it's just gonna break down and I'm gonna think that it was my neighbor's fault. But it's breaking apart and I think, all right, it's my house, so I'm responsible for it. I have to do something about it. Then the next thing is to assess, well, what is breaking? There's mold on the walls. Do I just need to take down one wall? Do I just need to paint it? Is it a structural damage and I need a professional and a whole team of people to come and like make sure that this doesn't crash? I think that's the next step, to be honest and recognize, okay, like, well, this is a subtle way in which I'm sabotaging myself. A lot of things we can process on our own or with friends through conversation and openness. And then there are some things that require more of you need some stronger tools to like uproot.
Yeah, so good. Nicholas, what would you say is the biggest collective wound of the masculine at the moment? What are men struggling with?
The biggest collective wound of the masculine, and what men are struggling with, I will say, is ignorance. And ignorance not as being stupid or not having knowledge, but as ignoring, like not seeing life. What I mean by this is we are raised in a hamster wheel of sorts, to chase money, to chase validation, to chase women, sex, fame, status, power. And for a lot of men that I know, and great men, life becomes a never-ending chasing of something greater. more money, a bigger company. Okay, you made 6 figures, now make 8 figures, now make 9 figures, now sell your company, now buy a jet, all these things. All right, now you have a girlfriend, try to have threesomes, try to have many girlfriends, try to have open relationships, try to do all these things, try to date many different women. You got a job, okay, next race, and men are ignorant, as in they're chasing their next goal, but they don't see. It's like you want to climb to the top of the mountain, but you're so focused with getting there that you don't see the path that you take. This is happening to a lot of men that I know. They've become blind by their ambition, their goals, and the ambition and goals is not a problem. That's a beautiful thing. It's the longing for expansion. The problem is when that happens at the expense of the heart, at the expense of the quality of their life experience. So I would say this is the biggest wound, because men are raised to chase something that will never ever be fulfilling. It will create a lot of comfort and pleasure perhaps, but never ever be of any lasting or genuine fulfillment. And they die with wealth, maybe even with a family that loved them, but without having ever felt it, because they were ignoring it all along, because there was always something greater to pursue. We live in a culture that glorifies your purpose goes above everything. I'm not saying that it should be sacrificed, but if your purpose does not include your well-being, the quality of your life, if it doesn't include your wife and your children and their well-being too, then it's a purpose that has come through division, through your mind, and not through your heart. It's a purpose that is not inclusive. So it cannot be life's purpose, because everything in life is inclusive if we look at nature. So the biggest wound is that we've been sold a narrative where we need to chase achievement or purpose, which is the spiritual word for achievement, at the expense of everything else, especially your heart, especially our present moment. Everything needs to be compromised in order to get to that place. But that place will never come. And life will go through our fingers, and our relationships will deteriorate as we chase something that even if we achieved it, will not fulfill us. All because we've been ignorant, which means we have been ignoring the moment, the beauty of what is right now. I think this is the wound, because in our quest for more, we objectify the world. Everything becomes a means to an end. Women, a means towards sex. Work, my health, my time, a means towards money and status and fame. Nature, a means towards production and profit. Everything is objectified. My body is just going to be a means towards getting more women, so I'm going to get myself big and do certain things so that I may have a result. And sure, it becomes a utilitarian kind of life, but it's stripped away from all beauty, and then everybody suffers. We suffer because life is not fulfilling. It's busy, it's super busy in that space. It can be pleasurable at times and comfortable, but never fulfilling. And women suffer greatly at the hands of men who are blinded by their lust for money, for power, for growth, for something else, for purpose even.
Thank you. And of course, that ultimate chasing something else, of course, keeps men and of course women, but in the future, right? And out of the present moment. How important is connecting to that present moment? And how can men who have been constantly focused on the future goals, always chasing what you were just talking about, be aware of the present moment and tools and practices that can bring them into that present moment? And again, why is that so important?
to be in the present moment is important because there's no other place to be. It's it's like your mind can be all over the place, but there's just one moment that you're always occupying. So this is our home. Learning to occupy this home in a way that is beautiful and nourishing, it's essential. Otherwise, there's no peace, there's no joy in life until we can occupy our home comfortably, which is to be present. So how to be present? Well, the thing is, we are always present, just not always present to what matters. We're present to our thoughts, to our fears of what's going to happen. We're present to our anxieties over what already happened, to our past, our future, and rarely to the moment, to the actual moment. We're present to our mental drama and rarely to life itself. Tools, there's 1,000. Meditation, movement, dancing, walking out in nature, music, arts, having kids. That's a huge medicine for the men who are ready for that. Nothing's going to force you to be more present for so many years and so many hours of a day like a child will, especially when they're like 2-3 years old and start to learn how to walk. You can't take your eyes off them because they'll kill themselves. They're too curious, and now they're running and they have too much energy, and there's lesser I don't want to say tools, but lesser experiences that can also invite us to be present. Ultimately, the number one thing is recognizing that if this moment is not enough, how will the next one be? Whenever you get married to that woman, whenever you break the 6-7 figure mark in your business, whenever you sell your business, whenever you buy the beach house, like nothing guarantees you that beyond maybe a few minutes or hours of comfort and pride that you will feel any differently than you feel right now, because you have not practiced being in the moment and enjoying it. So a sense of urgency is required. That's the first thing. Like, it has to hurt us to see life like zipping by. And for most men, this comes only when they're sick, when a person close to them dies. Then they realize, what am I doing? I'm just consumed by work, consumed by chasing all kinds of things, chasing women, perhaps chasing money, fame, and life is so brief. A lot of men wait until death knocks at their door, either directly or their families or their loved ones, to actually change, to recognize the urgency of learning to live well. For some, it's they lose a great woman. A great relationship fails because they were too busy doing something else and they were not present enough. And a garden will wilt without attention. A flower, what's the point of a flower's beauty if there's nobody to witness it? Like, it's so necessary. So the first thing is urgency. And if the urgency is there, life will provide a million outlets, a million invitations to be present. Some very strong, some more subtle. A very simple one is, well, simple, but it takes practice, is just remembering to breathe. To breathe deeply, which means you have to inhale fully and exhale fully. Most people hold back part of their exhalations, and this builds up tension in their system. A lot of the stress people carry is because they're afraid of death, they're afraid of a full exhalation, so it compounds inside the system. After a couple of deep breaths, it's almost impossible for someone to be too much in their head. So that's just a quick key. Right. Other than that, music, sex with a woman they love, arts, play, playing a game, hopefully a physical game, soccer, or baseball, or something. Watching a sunset, a sunrise, waking up on time for the sunrise, making it some time to watch the sunset. Life gives us plenty of free options to be present. And invitations, the sunrise is beautiful. There's no need for the sunrise and the sunset to be so beautiful. It's like a bonus, it's a gift. It's like, hey, here it goes. Your beginning of your day and the end of your day are gonna be beautiful beyond measure. And you don't have to do anything for that to happen. Just open your eyes and look at it, and you're gonna be moved to the point of tears. Like life is so generous, and then still like I'm gonna sleep a little bit more. It's too cold. I'm not gonna go outside. Um, Invitations, there are plenty. Life is really beautiful if you're willing to look at it. If we are willing to pay attention. There has to be urgency though. There has to be the resolution, like this needs to happen right now. This is important and it cannot wait. Everything else can wait, because everything else is not your life, but your actual life experience. How can it wait? It's the home you occupy. It's like, well, you want it to be a home that you ignore perpetually, or do you want to tend to it and ensure that, wow, I love being in this space and I come back to it quite often.
Oh, thank you. Nicolas, we've got 10, 15 minutes left. I like to open up the conversation to make sure that everything that you would wanted to bring into this conversation that you think is important to say to men has the opportunity to be said. So where would you like to take this conversation now?
Everything that is important for men to hear. I would say one of the most important things that men need to understand is that the level of responsibility they're willing to embrace will determine the level of freedom that they experience. I was raised seeing responsibility as a burden, an obligation. Well, to take care of other people, to have to commit to things, to be rigid, to be too strict with myself, that's not freedom. And then I started to realize that actually, like, big load makes life worth living in many ways. It also orients us as men. Quite often we have a lot of testosterone, which is something that most women cannot relate to. The way that a man feels by all the excess testosterone is very, 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 very different. And this means that the energy can be quite impulsive and violent sometimes. And I'm not saying that, that they become violent, but it's an energy that seeks very compulsive expression quite often. So as a man, it is important to have a guiding north, to have something greater that we're aimed towards. Because without that, our energy is going to find unconscious expression. The energy needs to find an outlet anyways. And if there's nothing greater, if there's no greater goal, greater vision that is being nourished in your life, then the outlet that is going to be found is going to be usually like the base level, first two chakras, survival and procreation, money and sex. This is 90 something percent of the human population right now. And maybe some a little bit more, and that's power and expression, but that's also quite limited. Nothing wrong with that, just limited. So I believe for men it's important to have something, whatever that is. Maybe it's the idea of a family. Maybe it's the idea of a beautiful relationship. Maybe it's the idea of being of service to their community. Whatever that vision is, there needs to be a guiding north. Doesn't mean that that's their life's purpose. It doesn't mean that that's all they're ever going to do in their life. No, things they evolve. What you desire today is the foundation for who you're going to be tomorrow, and so on. So there's no need to subscribe to these ideas of a divine purpose and the one thing that you came to do and that's it. No, life continues evolving, and so will you. But it's important to have a guiding light, to have something to move towards, because that will ensure that when you have to make a choice, that is taken into consideration. But when there's none of that, when you're responsible for nothing, for nobody, then it's so easy to make choices that are a bit reckless. If I don't have a family to take care of, or a partner that I love that I want to spend time with, or a business that I am devoted to, then somebody calls me and tells me, hey, let's go partying, let's take some drugs, let's hang out with some girls. Of course I'm gonna do that. There's nothing more exciting happening in my life. So it's necessary that whatever it takes, that men find something that is exciting, more than making money and having sex with women. This is very basic, and it creates a lot of chaos in the system, in the relationships. So it is important that men, number one, have something to orient themselves towards, because that's going to direct a lot of their energy, and it's going to ensure that it is used constructively instead of in a destructive way, which is what happens when there's nothing good or worthy to go after. And I will say also something that it's very, very, very important is it's important for men to reclaim their role as men. We live in a society, especially I would say in Europe and North America, where masculinity is labeled as toxic, where if you're a strong man, then you're right away part of the problem. God forbid you're straight and white, then you're in real trouble. You're a sinner just by being born. There's something wrong with you. Sure, there's a history of oppression, of chauvinism, of misogyny. There's many things. It's not about avoiding all of that, but it's necessary that masculinity is never shamed or avoided. It is a great gift and responsibility. The problem in the world is not that masculinity is toxic. The absence of masculinity is toxic. It is because men are no longer focused, committed, protective, and providing. That, back in the day, men were stewards of their land, of nature. They would rather die than let someone destroy the earth, because that was the mother, right? Especially in indigenous cultures. Today is like, let's just plow it, let's mine it, let's extract everything. Everything that was sacred is being desecrated in many ways. Women, sex with women has become just a sport for many men. So it's important to reclaim our place as men, and this means understanding what that means. It's not I'm going to be strong and beat my chest and sleep with a lot of women and make a lot of money. No, it means, as the title of the show, Heart Warriors, it means that you fight for what is true, with your heart, not at the expense of it. It means that you connect to how you feel, to your deepest truth, and you honor that, and you make sure that you don't sacrifice not your health, not your relationships, not life itself, just to pursue something else. It means that we stop apologizing for being men. We can apologize for making mistakes. That is human. That is not a masculine thing. It's a human thing. So yeah, I will say it is necessary that we don't feel ashamed of being born men. And more than that, we realize it's both a privilege and a responsibility. Because, all right, you're a man. That means you have a load to carry, a responsibility to embrace. There's a lot of women that need protection, not because they are weak, but because they are beautiful. They're worthy of being taken care of like that. It's not out of weakness, not that women cannot protect themselves. They can, but it's like a garden, you know. You don't take care of the garden because the garden is weak. No, you take care of it because it's something that you have reverence towards. So yeah, it's important that also in our relationships we show up in that way, that we speak up with kindness, with compassion, but with strength and with in a firm manner, because well, I think it's part of women's nature to test, what is my man made of? What if I speak in this way? Is he going to flinch? Is he going to react? Is he going to explode? Can he hold his ground? When can he in his center bring me back into my own center? You know, and and this means that you need to be loving, but you need to be firm, and that means that you have to be willing to be unpopular, especially with the people that you love, with your woman, with your friends. It means that you have to, like, say it like it is, but say it lovingly. Speak your truth and speak it with kindness. Don't be the rough warrior that I'm just gonna tell you how it is and fuck off. And don't be the doormat. Like, you have to find the middle ground where your words land, they are received, they're welcomed, but they also penetrate enough to serve, to be of service to your friends, your community, your woman. And finally, I would say, and this is my experience, I got married just over a year ago, and I was I was one of those that swore by open relationships and like polyamory and all kinds of like sexually freeing relationship agreements. And I swore I will never get married. I will never do this. And under the name of freedom, I want to be free. I had 1,000 reasons and explanations on why I want to commit. And nothing, and I've drunk ayahuasca over 100 times, and still nothing has changed my life more than committing to one woman, and committing from my heart. Not all the ayahuasca in the world, and that has done wonders for my growth, but the way in which my life, like, I set my life straight the moment that I committed to a woman. And I committed to her not because she was perfect. I had a lot of judgments towards my wife when we met, and a lot of things I wanted to change of her and that I judged her about, and that I, you know, for many months I kept looking out the window for greener grasses and thinking maybe I made a wrong choice. But eventually I decided I'm going to commit. This is my woman. I will give all of myself into this relationship, which means bye-bye pornography, Bye-bye random Tinder dates. Bye-bye the leaking of energy in many ways. Is scrolling through Instagram, just drooling over some nonsense. It means just everything, as I said, like orienting myself, my energies towards something higher, which for me was the idea of being a man of commitment and virtue. So what I will say is that, as seductive and tempting as sleeping around may seem, and as easy as it is in today's world, um, if you are serious about your growth as a man and your spiritual growth, nothing, well, there's very few things that will serve you to the same extent as committing, being devoted to one woman, because that will bring up all the nonsense, all your fears, all your excuses, all your nastiness. It will have, it's like trial through fire. You, everything that, every reason that you have not to be committed, not to be the man that you wish you were, everything's going to come up for you to deal with that. That's a great gift, but you have to commit, and it's a gift that you have no access to if you're scrolling through Tinder, if you're just using the next woman that you met, if you're just a serial monogamist. No, like, make a choice or be single. The shamans in Colombia, when you're apprenticing with them, they tell you have to be very, 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 very married or very, 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 very single. If you're dating, they'll tell you can continue dating, but you cannot come and apprentice with me and the plant medicines. Or they'll tell you, if you want to apprentice, you have to go on a dieta of women. You cannot have a woman for, the minimum is like 6 months, sometimes it's years, because like you have to deal with your nonsense before you're ready for that kind of commitment. Or you have to be so committed that you're not gonna, your energy is not gonna go all over the place. And I found this to be extremely, extremely powerful. Committing to love has transformed the way that I see myself. It has transformed the way that I see women, the way in which I respect women. It has transformed the way in which I serve the people that I work with, which has in turn made me more effective and therefore more wealthy as well. I have created in, especially the last year, 2 years, I've done with my time in 1 year what I didn't do in like 10 years during all my 20s, because I was so scattered in every way, like learning to sing, learning to play guitar, learning a lot of things, launching different businesses. It's just, it's overwhelming how, looking back, how much time, energy was wasted in lack of commitment. So I will say to the men watching this, you want to be a heart warrior. A true warrior is not, beating your chest and fighting other dudes. Warrior is, can you fight against the parts within you? Can you overcome the parts within you that keep you playing small? And I invite you to consider that every excuse that you have not to commit to your current partner or to a woman is, like, that is where the work lies. And the sooner that you find a way to be devoted, to be committed, the sooner that locked potential is going to be freed up. And then you're going to be wondering, why didn't I do this before? This is so much more beautiful in every way.
Oh, Nicolas, that is just such a beautiful, powerful message, and one that hasn't come up yet, in this series of Heart Warriors. So we're going to wrap up now, but before we do, could you please let people know where they can find you? And also, I'm interested in, just very quickly, the title of your upcoming book and why you chose that title.
All right. So my upcoming book is called Grace and No Bullshit Journey from Pain to Purpose. And Grace, well, everyone knows what grace is, but for a lot of people, it's a religious word. It's a word that is used perhaps in Christian churches or in these spaces. So I wanted to make sure that, okay, there's a word that can be misconstrued and misunderstood as woo-woo spirituality. So a no bullshit journey. So it's very practical. The title, in all truth, it was during an ayahuasca ceremony that I understood the book that I needed to write, the cover, the title, all these things. But in essence, it is a journey from pain to purpose. It's a journey from those situations that sometimes we believe or we feel are a curse of life that induce a lot of suffering. And it's the whole journey, and it's very practical. There's some parts of it that is perspectives and invitations to see the world in a different way. But I am giving for the first time and for free in that book a lot of the tools that I've used so far with only with paid clients. And these are tools so that if someone goes through it, if someone invests the time using them, they can walk that route from pain into feeling empowered by it. Grace, I feel what happened with my ex-girlfriend was grace. It was the hand of God just hidden. It was medicine that was served in a very bitter cup. It was very bitter to swallow and very uncomfortable, but it was the greatest gift. So Grace is a book that aims to teach people and show experientially how they can relate to that which is painful in a way that it's empowering, because that's the end of suffering. It's not a book about be happy, be joyful, say some affirmations in the mirror and everything is great. No, that's bypassing. And it's not a book to tell you, okay, you need to make more money or get a different girlfriend to be happy. No, that's superficial. It is a book that acknowledges that pain exists, is an inherent part of life. You cannot avoid it. It's gonna come. But if you develop a healthy relationship with it, then the suffering goes. Because if there's no pain, oh, it's great, you're enjoying it. And if there is pain, you open your arms and you think, whoa, here it comes. Let's see what this is about this time. You're not resisting anymore. So there's no tension, there's no friction. I think that is to live in grace, where everything feels like an act of God. Beautiful, oh, this is a blessing. Painful, wow, this is another blessing. And let's figure this one out. So the book is that, it's a journey, experiential, like some of the tools that are there are really profound, and they can have a person in very little time feel that way towards maybe their previous partners, maybe a health complication, maybe the death of someone close to them. Yeah, so it's a no bullshit, which means it's practical. I'm not here to have people develop blind faith on things. And a journey from pain to purpose, finding power in that which was once painful. And they can find me on Facebook, Nicolas Canon, without H, Nicolas Canon. On Instagram at Nico Canon, NICOCANON _ On these two, there's some links for the VIP waitlist for the group, for the book. It's going to launch at the end of the year or early next year. I'm waiting for the dates from the publisher. And that's pretty much it. Like right now, I've taken a break from coaching, group coaching, and private clients to focus on the group. So the only other thing that is available right now is I host a few times per year ayahuasca retreats in Colombia. We work with Colombian shamans, and it's usually anywhere from 5 to 10 days in a temple that I helped build with my own hands during COVID. Beautiful sacred space. Yeah, that's also on my Instagram, or the website is ayahuascacolombia.com.
Okay, and we'll put all those links down below. Well, thank you so much, Nicolas. It's been an absolute pleasure. Loved all your wisdom and insights and experience. So thank you from my heart to yours. Thank you so much.
Likewise.
If you could please like, share, subscribe this message, I'd be very grateful. And we'll see you next time on Heart Warriors. Nicolas, if you could just stay on a moment, please. Thank you. Bye.